はい。はい。ゴーンホーム、続きやっていきます。続きって言っても前回エンディングを迎えたんですけどね。で、今回はですね、前回エンディングを迎えた後に、ひょっとしたらマルチエンディングになってないよねっていうのが気になったんで、ネットを調べていたらですね、どうもですね、開発者の人のコメントが聞けるモードがあるらしいんですよね。で、今回はそれをやっていこうと思います。で、最初から始めるっていう時に、これ、この左下の拡張コメンタリーっていうのがあって、なんかいろいろ設定できるらしいんですよね。開始時から全ての明かりをオンに、暗闇が苦手なプレイヤー向け。一応これオンにしといていいんじゃない？で、見取り図機能を無効に。いや、これ見取り図いるでしょ。で、全ての鍵を開けた状態、もう開いた状態でいいね。で、日記の再生無効に。いや、日記再生お願いします。で、これですね。このコメンタリー。開発者にもコメントを聞けるようになります。日記の再生を無効にすると利用できませんと。じゃあこれで開始していきます。ね、こういうね、開発者のコメントを聞くっ
Hi,
ていう、
Mom. So I got my ticket home
こ
from
れ普通
Europe.
にあるん
I
だ。
get back on June 6th, but it's a really late flight because that was the cheapest, so it gets in at midnight. But don't worry, I'll get a shuttle from the airport so you don't have to pick me up. Like, really seriously, you don't have to. Okay, so love you. See you soon. Bye.
これ、最初のね、スタートと同じですね。ただね、これがあるね、これ。スティーブ、コメンタリーモードへようこそ。
Hi, I'm Steve Gaynor. I'm the co-founder of the Fulbright company. We made Gone Home. I was the writer and designer. And thank you for taking a look at our commentary mode. Whenever you find an icon like the one you just clicked on, you can find out a little bit more about the game. I want to thank everybody who's added commentary. Janman and Carla, my co-founders of the company, Kate Craig, our 3D artist, Chris Remo, our composer, Sarah Grayson, the voice of Sam Greenbrier, and Corin Tucker, the lead singer of Heavens to Betsy and Slater Kinney and other awesome bands. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy commentary mode.
結構ね、いろんな人がコメントをしてるっぽいね。歌を歌っている人とか、声を当ててる人とか、CG とか作ってる人とか。でね、こういうね、開発者が、どういう裏話、開発の裏話とかっていうのを喋るっていう機会っていろんなゲームであると思うんだけど、これはね、賛否両論あるよね。そういう裏話が聞きたいっていう人もいれば、そもそも作品は作品の世界観に完結して、そういう裏話とかっていうのはもうユーザーの想像に任したいっていう人もいるんで、これはね、結構意見は分かれるところだと思うね。僕はね、こういうね、探索系とか推理とかするタイプだったら、一応裏話というか、そういうのはちょっと知りたいなと思いますね。あるね、これ。
So Christmas Duck. Christmas Duck is a fan favorite. He's kind of a mascot, I guess, and I think that's partly because it's a weird concept, a Christmas duck, and partly because it's like the first unique thing that you encounter in the game. It's kind of personified as like a little character, but the thing is, Christmas Duck was not planned. When we were starting the project, we didn't have a 3D modeler because Kate came on a couple months after we started, and we needed a bunch of 3D models. And so I was just going through the Unity asset store. So I was going through the list and saw this Christmas duck, and I was like, "What is that?" Okay, and I grabbed it and we used it as like a test object just to set up the system where you can grab stuff and carry it around. And then I ended up saying, "All right, we got this Christmas duck, I'll hide the key under it." And instead of replacing the free model with a totally different thing, just made a real version of it. And Carla modeled it and Kate textured it, and we kept him in the game, and we're glad because he's everybody's little friend. Good old Christmas duck.
あれ、今の話だと、このクリスマスダックって、Unity っていう開発環境の、デフォルトで入っているアセットモデリングなんだ。そのままゲームに使っていいのかな。こういうのって、でもどうなんだろう。こういうのっていろんなライセンスがあって、商用に使ってもいいですよ。ただし、使う場合は、誰が制作したとか、どこのものですよっていうのも明記してくださいとか、そういういろんなライセンスがあるんだけど、Unity はそこら辺結構緩いのかな。あんまり触ったことないから分かんないんだけど、でね、いろんな CG ソフトとか CAD ソフトで、こういうデフォルトで入っているフリーで使えるモデリングデータって結構あるんだよね。ブレンダーとかでも、それもCD モデリングのソフトなんだけど、そういうのでもね、こんなのあった気がするね。でもそんな緩いの、Unity。で、このポーチにはね、もう他に調べるところは多分ないですね。早速階段にあるね。環境アセット。これ Unity の環境の話ですね。
Hello, my name is Kate Craig, and I was creating a lot of the environment assets for the game. Not all of them, some of them I had help with, which I'll touch on a little later, but most of the stuff like the walls and the floors, some of the larger pieces of furniture were my doing, and I'm going to be talking about some of the environmental storytelling aspects in Gone Home. I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't mention the work that my wife Emily Carroll did on the project. She did the house title image that we've used for our wallpapers and for the start screen of the game. She did the loading cassette tape, and she did the maps in the house. And actually, Carla made a font out of her handwriting because we wanted something that was just a little bit spooky, maybe a little ominous, but something that sort of suited the tone of the game. And I was really glad to be working with her, and I was really glad that the other guys were too. We had a really good time. And people have responded quite positively to her title screen, which is something that I really appreciate, and I know she does too.
あれ、あんまり細かい話しなかったね。なんか Unity のいろんな話をしてくれるのかなと思ったんだけど、で、ここがトイレですね。一応ね、このストーリーを普通に、進めていた順番で探索はしていこうと思いますね。ちなみにこういうね、引き出しの中に入ってたりしないよね。まさかそんな分かりにくいことをわざわざしないと思うんだけど、ハーベイおじさん。ちょっと待って、ハーベイおじさん。そう、これ。このカード。これね、サムの誕生日にね、このハーベイおじさんっていう人が、こんなイラスト付きのハガキ、バースデーハガキを送ってくれてるんですよね。気のいいおじさんだなと思ったんだけど、ただね、このハーベイおじさんの情報ってこれしかなかった。ストーリーにね、何も絡まなかった。
Yeah, the biggest purpose of the card was, to say, oh, Sam is 17, if you look for this thing. But there's we need so much handwriting in the game, especially for like one-off characters that you don't see their handwriting more than once. And we knew we needed a birthday card from some member of Sam's more extended family that you were never going to hear from again. And so I was like, okay, it could be her uncle. And as an Easter egg, kind of like wink and nod thing, like we're fans of, the Looking Glass legacy of games and Deus Ex and Dishonored, and so I got in contact with Harvey Smith, who was the lead designer of Deus Ex and the co-creative lead of Dishonored, and asked if he would just write on a piece of paper, "Happy Birthday, Sam," from Uncle Harvey, and he just took a picture with his cell phone. And
like 5 minutes after you asked him. It was amazing. He was just like, yes, I will do this immediately.
Yeah.
It was the best.
I think, he took a picture with his cell phone, and it was really cool. Harvey's a great guy, and I love his games, and we're, super honored to have his signature in the hub of the Greenbrier House.
Hell yeah.
そんな リアルで送られてきたハガキを本当にゲームの中に取り込んだの？これいいね。それ面白いね。あ、確かに17歳のバースデーって書いてるから、これね、見たときあんまりこれ意識しなかったね。目的はサムが17歳っていうのを強調する意味があったんですね。あんまり気にならなかったんだけどな。で、これ何？ハイスクール、この袋のマーク。これね、最初見たときね、このマークで外出歩いたりするの恥ずかしいなと思ったんだけど、どういうこと？
The Goodfellow High School jacket and the logo generally is a reference to the logo for Minerva's Den, the section of Rapture that DLC takes place in that we worked on together. But we didn't want to make it look exactly like the owl logo from that game. We wanted it to be, an homage or a reference or whatever.
Yeah, so we decided that since this is a Pacific Northwest school and town and setting, that we would go for some native style representation. And let's see.
Well, actually, we were struggling with it for a little while because we wanted. At first, I was saying, just make it look like a very 90s looking school mascot logo illustration that's just cheap that maybe one of the students did or something, and the direction wasn't good enough, and we didn't really have a good enough example to work from. And then Kate actually came to visit.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And she suggested, oh, what if it's like a Pacific Northwest Native American style approach, and that really just clicked and made total sense.
あれ、今ね、バイオショックっていうバイオショック2のゲームの制作に関わってるって話してたね。バイオショック2ってね、FPS のゲームで、確かね、水の中で、なんか事件が起こって、それの探索に向かっている潜水服を着た主人公のゲームだったんだけど、結構有名なゲームなんですよね。じゃあ結構メジャーなゲームの制作に、ゴーンホームを作った人って関わってたんですね。で、こっち側は特になんもないね。でもこの家具の配置説明してほしかったな。これちょっと使いにくくありませんかって思ったんだけど。そうで、やった、これ。このメッセージの話だよね。留守番電話入ったんで。どういうこと？違う。母親の手書き文字の話か。ダニエルの話ね。
Oh man, mom handwriting. We went through a lot of different moms for handwriting. A lot of different moms contributed handwriting for a game. At first, let's see, how did we do? What were we doing at first? I think I just did it and it wasn't great. And then we had Emily do it, but her handwriting was used so heavily in other parts of the game that we had to find someone else. And I think we actually had Yaman try to do it for a while before he was Dad's handwriting. And then we got Yaman's mom, and she was ideal for it. Really good mom handwriting. Yeah.
マジで？確かに手書きの筆跡なんで、ちゃんと誰が適した筆跡か、誰の筆跡がそのキャラクターのイメージなのかっていうのをちゃんと考えてるんだね。言われてみれば確かにそうなんだけど、普通にゲームをやってるユーザーとしては、そこって全く意識しなかったね。開発者としては、そういうのもちゃんと考えるんだね。サウンドトラック。
Hi, I'm Chris Remo, the composer on Gone Home. In my commentary tracks, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what went into creating the original music soundtrack for the game. Gone Home is an unusual game, musically speaking, in that it consists of two distinct music soundtracks. But one of those probably more frequently commented on is the collection of licensed Riot Girl songs that the player finds in Sam's cassette tapes strewn around the house. The other one is the original music that accompanies the player's undirected exploration of the house and underscores almost every one of Sam's audio diary recordings. When Steve first asked me to do music for Gone Home, I was really excited about it. but there are almost no parameters for what that meant in terms of format or scope. Having played an early build of the game, I started by just doing a few musical sketches with no real regard for length or usage, mainly consisting of vintage electric piano sounds like Wurlitzers and Fender Rhodes. I chose those instruments because I wanted sounds that would feel at home in the era of the game. The Twin Peaks soundtrack used a lot of Rhodes, for example, but would also blend into the background and not share much tone in common with the abrasive Riot Girl guitars. Some of the instrumentation and ideas changed from those first sketches, but they also contained one of the main themes that ended up accompanying Sam's arc throughout the final game.
カセットテープたくさんこの家にあって、で、再生できてたんだけど、あれは90年代の曲っていうのは分かったんだけど、それって著作権って切れてんのかな。その90年代の曲を自分でカバーして作り直してってわけじゃなくて、そのまんま流してるんだよね、多分。著作権が切れたからフリーで使っていいですよっていうことだと思うんだけど、音楽関係の著作権って何年だっけ。確か国によっても違うんだよね。でこれ何。コリンタッカー、Heavens to Betsy。あれそんなあったっけ。
Hi, this is Corin Tucker from Heavens to Betsy. And Heavens to Betsy was a band that formed in 1991, actually. And I actually got the idea for joining a band when I moved to Olympia, Washington, and became a fan of the music scene there. And it seemed like everyone was in a band. So I decided I was going to start a band too. But I didn't actually start the band until I went home after the first year of college. I went back to Eugene, Oregon, and my high school friend Tracy Sawyer and I started playing music together, and that was the beginning of Heavens to Betsy. So I had told, with my big mouth, I had told all my friends that I was going to start a band. And the summer of, I think it was 1991, my friend Michelle Noel booked the International Pop Underground in Olympia, Washington. And she helped organize a night at the convention called Girl Night. And it was all women musicians. So she called me and said, hey, let's get you on stage with that, you want to play the show that I'm organizing. This totally new band that had never performed before. I mean, we'd never performed ever any kind of music. Got invited to play this big show at the Capitol Theater in Olympia in front of all of our musical heroes, right? Everyone from K Records, all of Fugazi was there, all of Bikini Kill was there. This music that I was a huge fan of. Suddenly, that was our very first show, the very first Heavens to Betsy show. And we were terrified, but we did it, and people loved it, and it was, it changed my life forever that night.
今のコリン・タッカーさんの話って、このゲームに出てくるロニーが学校のバンドに参加した理由、流れとよく似てるね。確かね、学校の学園祭かなんかでバンドがあったんだけど、そこの人が一人喧嘩別れして脱退して、でこのゲームのねサムの恋人のロニーがね、じゃあ代わりに私弾きますよって感じで言ったんだよね。でひょっとしてヘブンズなんとかって、やっぱりこれか、このバンド名ね、ヘブンズ・トゥ・ベッツィ。じゃあこれって本当に1995年当時に実際のバンドなんだね。こういうバッジってね、この家の至る所に置いてあったんだけど、多分実際のバンドだね。この話を見ると。大丈夫？この引き出しの中に、さっきのコメンタリーが隠されているとか言ったら、ちょっと困るんだけど、そんな分かりにくいことしないよね。で、これ、お父さんとこね。不思議の宇宙のアレス。何それ？これ、このものひょっとして。いや、これ、お父さんの妄想そうです。
So here's one of Dad's pulpy JFK books. He's now moved on from primary sources to theories about how JFK was killed. However, this one purports to contain the truth. Yeah, the publishing company is a doofy inside joke because, you know, there's Harcourt Brace, the publisher that exists, and so I was trying to think of a good name for a publisher, and being a big nerd, I immediately thought of Harcourt Fenton Mudd and how he basically sounds like a publishing company, so...
You have to say who that is.
No! Alright, fine. He's an awful character from
Star Trek.
Original Star Trek, which is called Mudd's Women, and also there's another one whose name an episode I can't remember for some reason.
I'm Mudd.
Ah, fuck! Yes, okay. Thank you.
It's a Star Trek reference. You did
Yes.
it, Carla.
What?
ああ、そんな示唆があったんだ。スター・トレックはちゃんと見たことないんだよね。確かにね、このお父さんが書いているSF 的なミステリーも入ってると思うんだけど、そういう小説って、スター・トレックのイメージもあるかもしれないの。SF 面のところはそこから引っ張ってる感じしますね。で他になんかある？ちょっと待って。扉？これ扉、なんか関係あるの？
The doors were actually one of the hardest things in the game to get working correctly, and I know that there's still some bugs existing with the doors, actually. But it's a surprisingly hard problem, which is why most video games just have doors that kind of slide away into nothingness or open in strange ways or don't, let you interact fully with doors. But of course, it's in a house like in Gone Home, a realistic house. It's important that everything be as natural as possible. The one concession we made to video gaminess is that the doors all swing both ways, which never happens in a real house, but it's necessary to prevent the player trapping themselves in some strange state.
そうそう。これね、このゲームをやっててね、最初にちょっと違和感があったんだけど、確かにね、このゲームの扉ってね、どっちにも開くようになってるんだよね。これね、至るところのドアが全部これになってて、最初ね、物置の小さな部屋でそれを気づいて、あれと思ったんだけど、バグ対策用なんだ。なるほどね。で、ちゃんと開かなくなって出られなくなったら、ユーザーからクレーム来るんで、そういう対策をするんですね。ちなみにここ開いてる？これ通路があるんだけど、ちゃんと開くね、ここ。雑誌。これ？これ何の雑誌だっけ？女装壁。男への視線。ビバリーヒルズ青春白書。これなんだっけ？この部屋ってお父さんが使ったんだっけ？
Here we have Fresh Magazine, which is a synthesis and pastiche of Sassy Magazine, which if you haven't looked at it or if it wasn't, something that you cared about in the early 90s, it was very feminist and, strongly individualist and actually gave good advice. It was actually really good. Anyway, so yeah, this is the type treatment, the super grungy type treatment is totally indicative. That's how it used to be. Oh yeah, and amusingly, of course, our cover model is Rachel, Steve's wife. I had to make her put on this awful light pink lipstick and do the 90s-ist stuff imaginable. And she did it.
It was your idea to put a braid in the front of her bangs?
Yes.
Yeah, it seems like... Congratulations.
Oh, thanks.
この当時のことを知ってる人はこういう本を見ると受けたんだろうね。でもこれアメリカだからな。それよくわかんないっす。ちゃんと時代交渉をして、この開発の人たちは実際その人たちが生きてきた時代をモデル化してるから、時代交渉をする必要はあんまりなかったのかもしれないね。これさっきお父さんの仕事部屋にあったね、引き出しの暗証番号の話ですね。0451。
Inside of this file folder, you find the first combination code in the game. This code goes to Dad's locked filing cabinet.
and it's 0451, which is a bit of a tradition slash in-joke amongst. I mean, it's not really an in-joke. It's just an internal reference amongst this lineage of games that hark back to immersive sims that are kind of first-person exploration games that started with Ultima Underworld and System Shock, and 451 was the first key code in System Shock, and then it was also the first key code in System Shock 2 and Deus Ex and Bioshock and most recently Dishonored. And yeah, I've personally worked on a couple of games that had 0451 as the first code in them, and we were really adherent to the tenets of the interactive model and kind of the principles of design behind those games when we were designing how Gone Home works. And so to maintain that tradition, we also made it the first code in our game.
And you made it the tattoo on your arm.
I also got a tattoo of 0451 because it is sort of a symbol of this certain philosophy of game design that's important to me. And yeah, this writing, breaking canon, is in Emily's handwriting. Emily's handwriting is technically only in the font that exists outside the game. She doesn't actually do the handwriting in any of the characters, but yeah, I had her write 0451 in her very distinctive handwriting, and then I got a tattoo of it and figured I would use that source image as the image that you find on the inside of this folder.
これマジでそんな初めて聞いたんだけど、ね、今の話ってアメリカのゲームの文化だと思うんだよね。日本のゲームってね、そんなこと全く記憶にないし、たくさんゲームやってきたけど、暗証番号に0451をよく使ってるのって初めて聞いたんで、多分ね、アメリカ発のゲームではそういう慣習みたいなのがあったんですね。だからこの話ちょっと面白いね。これからね、いろんなゲームするときに、よくわかんない4桁の番号、暗証番号出てきたら、この0451、451を絡めて数字を入れてみるっていうのは、これいいかもしれないですね。この慣習にのっとった開発者が作っているっていう可能性があるんで、結構広く使われてるやつ多いからね。で、これ今、お父さんの部屋が終わったんで、次なんだっけ、音楽室、思い出した。ここでちょっと待って、いっぱいある。ここでお父さんがね、ビデオデッキのレビューするために鑑賞したんですよね、ビデオ鑑賞。ケーブル、これこのケーブルそうそう、思った。これね、こんなケーブルの配置にしたらね、足を光りそうだなと思って、危ないなと思ったんだよね。で、このケーブルね、別のね、音楽室でもこういうケーブルがあって、なんでこんな床で生やしてんのっていうふうに思ったのは覚えてますね。
When you're putting like lamps and stuff around a house, one thing that you have to deal with is plugging them in. And something that always annoys me about level design in games is when there's some lamp or piece of electronics that would have to be plugged in because it doesn't run on batteries, but it doesn't have a cable because video games. And so since a big part of the point of Gone Home is the specificity of the house and the believability of all the details,
because of that, Steve himself
I spent some late nights with my meager Maya skills modeling custom cables for each of the things that's plugged in so that the cables actually run from the TV or the lamp or whatever to an outlet in the wall.
It is a really good detail. I think that I'm proud of you for getting that in there, Steve. That's important. Yeah.
これはね、いいモデリングしたと思うね。これ実際のリアルの家でもこういう電化製品のケーブルって悩むんですよね。で、この線が邪魔な時はやっぱり無線、電池式やつにしたいなというふうに思ったりもするんで、 結構細かいとこリアリティ追求してるね。ビデオテープ、このたくさんのやつ。ビデオテープとかね、そうそう、これね、今の人はね、見たことないと思う。
So these are all the VHS tapes, or most of them, in the house. And these in the TV room are from they only belong to Dad and Sam, because Mom has some VHS tapes, but they're up in the bedroom. And you can tell Dad's because he writes in a big, heavy, all caps style handwriting.
嘘
And
そんな違った
Sam does not. So contrary to popular opinion, the X-Files tapes are not Dad's, they're in fact Sam's.
But stuff like JFK
Yes.
has an obvious dad interest, and some of the other stuff that we put in there was very much like, what is a dad movie?
Yeah.
You know, what is a if when we were growing up, for instance, like what is a movie that our dad or a neighbor's dad would have? So stuff like The Andromeda Strain or Moonraker, it's just sort of like, yeah, dads
love that shit.
Yeah, dads that were born in the 50s were super into that kind of stuff. And then some of it was, you know, stuff that we liked or remembered from when we were growing up. Like, you will know that Carlo was involved in making this game because Beetlejuice and RoboCop are on a VHS tape. That's most of what you need to know about Carlo.
That's true.
Right there.
ちょっと待って、ここってね、お父さんのビデオデッキばっかりだと思ってたんだけど、確かに X ファイルってここで言うと新しめの映画だと、テレビ番組だと思うんで、マジか。そもそも両親の寝室にビデオテープがあったかな、それ記憶にないんだけど、サムの声、なんか重要そうな話聞ける？
My name is Sarah Grayson, and I do the voice of Sam Greenbrier in Gone Home. Currently based out of Portland, Oregon, so right around where the Fulbright Company is from, which is part of, I guess, how this all came to be. I started doing voiceover work probably about 4 or 5 years ago. It's been a bit of an on and off journey because I also have had regular 9-to-5 jobs that whole time. So I always get excited when I see video game auditions come across because it's always been something that I wanted to do and really excites me because I'm a video game fan myself. So there was an audition that came across that at the time was entitled Dear Diary, and it had this wonderful description about being this sort of 16, 17-year-old girl. Not too much detail about her, just that she was new to her school, new to this place she was living, and her sister had moved away. So she was sort of writing out her thoughts as if she was talking to her sister. So most of the time, I'll stand up at the mic when doing auditions. But for this one, I thought, well, no one's actually going to read their diary standing up. Like this is kind of you write your diary while lying down in your bed or like sitting cross-legged on the floor or whatever. So I ended up having to pull the mic down, sat on my couch, legs crossed, got nice and cozied up in like my pajamas, and started reading it.
マジか。収録する時の姿勢とかも気にせんの？でもこのサムの声の人やっぱり上手だねって感じしたね。聞いててね、なんか聞きやすい感じした。これからもいろんなゲームでもしかするとこのサムの声優さんとは合うかもしれないですね。そうそう、これ。こういう狭い部屋でもね、ちゃんと両開きになってるんだよね。でこの部屋もね、探索、ちょっと待って、そういえば、ここにね、隠しの、ちょっと待ってくれ。これ、秘密の隠しエリアにも、あるじゃん。これ危ないな。見逃すとこだった。暗証番号の話さっき聞いたんだけど、
This is where you find the first half of Sam's locker, or I guess it's actually the second half of Sam's locker combo as far as what the piece of paper is. But at first, there were the locker combination sheet was torn into 3 pieces, so you had 1 digit on each of them, and it was actually right before we sent out our IGF build to the judges. It was the night before, and Carla came down to the basement and she was like, at 3 o'clock in the morning last night, I woke up in bed just being like, "Oh, we can't have it in 3 pieces. That's way too gamey. Well, that's bad. We have to fix that." And
I forgot about that.
and you were absolutely right. And you've had a couple of those being woken up by us making a bad decision kind of moments over the course of the development, and they were always important changes that needed to be made.
そういうところにこだわりがあるのはありがたいですね。このね、ゲームにできるだけ没入感を持たせてほしいんで、あんまりね、お使い的な状況になってほしくないんですよね。で、ここら辺はもう見て、あとは音楽室が残ってるよね、ここ。あるよね。本棚のそうそう、これ思った。これね、なんで部屋のど真ん中でこの本棚を置いたと思ったら、これ邪魔なんだけど、なんでこんなことした？
Most of the bookshelves in the house are filled with undifferentiated books. I mean, they're not undifferentiated, but they are low detail because, God, it would be an entire dev cycle's worth of work to actually do plausible spines on every single book. That would kill us. And then to repeat a whole bunch of books would also be sort of terrible and not be very plausible. So we had chiefly unlabeled books or books in which the labels had been rubbed off due to age, etc. And we had a few individual books that were more precisely and specifically named.
The way that we did the books in the game is we made like 3 or 4 of these clumps of books that have the generic spines on them. They're just sort of filler books. They're kind of like what would be in the bookshelves of like a lawyer's office in a in a cheap lawyer's TV commercial or something.
Right, where they buy them by the foot and whatever.
Yeah, and then we took 1 or 2 clumps and retextured them to all have specific readable spines on them, and then I just took those clumps and broke them up and scattered the individual books around in different bookshelves in the house, so that hopefully I think every bookshelf has at least 1 unique book in it. That might not be true of everything in the library since there's so many bookshelves there, but I guess I should say every or almost every bookcase had at least 1 unique book in it that never repeated, to kind of split the difference of, okay, they're not all generic, but also we can't afford to make them all unique, and we didn't want to have any repeat in an obvious way. So that was our strategy for trying to not do any of the things that we wanted to not do.
これね、確かにその置き方するとね、違和感がないんだよね。リアリティのある置き方できるんだけど、ただね、今のね、ゲーム開発の現場だと、古い方法だと思うんだよね。今はね、自動生成するっていう形で、多分こういう、置いてる家具とか、ランダムに配置するとか、そういうね、同じようなものが複数並ぶっていうのって、もうそういう自動生成システムで生成してると思うんだよね。多分それは外を走っている時の草の表現とか、木の表現とか、家の表現とか、多分そういうのもね、含めて全部自動生成にもう切り替わってるんじゃないのかな。少人数で開発するようなゲームの場合は、そこまでそういうシステムを使わないと思うんだけど、もうメジャータイトルはそういう風になってると思うんだよね。で、これ何？月経周期、この学校からの宿題の話ね。サムが途中で妄想小説を入れて先生に怒られたやつ。
Sam's story slash school assignment called The Menstrual Cycle, a novella, is kind of a fan favorite. We've found like a lot of people have enjoyed it a lot, and it's one of those weird things where it wasn't planned. Like it was, I just let's see. I had decided that I wanted Sam to have done like some homework, and I thought sex ed homework would be interesting because sex ed is a weird class in high school to be in, and so I Google searched for an actual sex ed assignment, and the assignment is a real sex ed assignment that is given out in like the Pacific Northwest, like Seattle. I think this is technically from the Seattle School District website that I got this from. So I found this thing which I didn't come up with, that I was kind of presented with, and I think I had been reading some stuff about like cool female spies in World War II, or like saboteurs, that had been part of like the French Resistance and stuff like that, and so that's why the history book is next to the sex ed assignment. The intended implication being Sam was doing history homework and sex ed homework, and the history unit was on World War II, and so kind of as a fuck you to all of the annoying assumptions implied by the sex ed assignment, she wrote this story about a woman in the war who was more interesting than her menstrual cycle, like that is a person, but while fulfilling the requirements of the thing. And yeah, it ended up being this really kind of strange juxtaposition of concepts that ended up saying a lot about Sam, I think.
うん、確かにこの小説はサムの妄想がよく反映されてて、サムの抱えている問題についてもだいぶここで分かったね。でもね、これ1995年当時の時代を想定したゲームなんだけど、1995年って性教育ってちゃんとされてたのかな。アメリカは日本よりも多分進んでると思うから、そこら辺多分しっかりしてるんだと思うんだけど、よりもね、ちゃんとやってないと思うんだよね。そういうことってできるだけ教えるのダメっていう、そういう慣習があったような気がするんだけどね。で、これは、エイドリアン・ロリーニ。誰それ？多分歌手かな。
This is our old-timey record that we got from archive.org, source of all good things. It's by Adrian Rollini when he was with apparently the Taproom Gang. The song is entitled Got a Need for You, in case you can't read it, but you should be able to read it. And the duck I found on the internet. Adrian Rollini I got into him when I was on Bioshock 2 and helping source the soundtrack for that. And I did a lot of listening to 40s big band stuff, and Adrian Rollini was one of the ones that I really liked, and so it was cool to be able to revisit that.
ということは、このエイドリアン・ロリーニさんっていう人の著作権も切れてるんだね。ネットからアーカイブ拾ってきて、普通にゲームの中に埋め込んだらしいから、確かに古い曲だね。ちょっと何よりも曲。レコードってあんな感じなんだっけ？針をね、手で引っ張ったら、変な音した気がする。確かね、これ、古典位置かなんかな。それで演奏してるとこを触ったことがあるんだよね。で、こっちになんかある？こっちには特にありませんよと。じゃあ、このエリアについてもコメンタリーは多分全部見たかな。で、こっちはね、もうそのままチラチラだよね。そうそうそう。アンジェラ15歳の日。アンジェラって誰？
I feel like one of the best bits of advice was actually from the Fulbright team before going in to do the first recording. And it was a suggestion that I should watch some episodes of My So-Called Life, which was great because I'd watched them all when when they were actually on. It was one of those favorite shows my sister and I would sit down and watch every week. And so going back and watching them was definitely not a hard chore to have to do. So I basically went through all of the episodes I could find online in a couple of days. So it was a bit of a sudden binge watch of My So-Called Life, but it was great because I think watching My So-Called Life was a nice reminder of what a more natural presentation of a teenager is. So it was really, I don't know that it would have gone as well had I not done that.
そうすると結構有名な小説なんですね。青春小説っていう感じだと思うんだけど、多分それもアメリカ文学の中で有名で、日本には多分伝わってきてないんじゃないのかな。聞いたことないんだけど、アンジェラ15歳の日々って、ひょっとして日本でも有名なのかな。聞いたことないよ。で、1階の探索終わった時にこれで2階に行ったんですよね。で、地下室最初行けなかったんで、作曲のプロセス。
We never really discussed the idea of individually scoring each audio log ahead of time. I just got an email one day from Steve after they had done the first round of voice recording with Sarah Grayson, who did an amazing job as Sam. And he said he'd been thinking about the idea of giving each log a piece of music to ground it in the proper tone. So I just started doing these short 20 to 60 second pieces, and that ended up being the bulk of the work for the game. It was a very iterative process. I did them in the order they were recorded, and I would just keep sending revisions of each log to Steve, taking his feedback, modifying the piece, and sending it back. Especially at the beginning, the feedback was almost always pull it back more. I've never done music this subdued before. Even more so than most game music, it primarily exists to quietly suggest a mood and tone to the player. Sarah's voice is always the main audio content. The game soundtrack I worked on previous to this was Blendo Games' 30 Flights of Loving, which consists of some really huge, bombastic, brassy pieces. So switching gears to Gone Home and constantly hearing pull it back, less melody, was surprisingly challenging at first. But over time, I think Steve and I developed a pretty good rapport. For the most part, the diaries required fewer revisions each time. And it's always a good reminder in a collaborative endeavor that your contribution only exists to make the whole work better, not to be seen or heard unto itself.
ちょっと待って、嘘でしょ。これ日記にね、あれ20何個ぐらいサムの日記あったんだけど、全部音楽変わってたの？そう。全然気がつかなかった。確かにさっきね、作曲家に依頼した人も、あくまでメインはサムの語りであって、音楽は抑えてくれって話があったんで、あんまり意識することなかったんだけど、マジか、大変だったね、作曲家さん。そんな短いやつを20何個も作ったの？これ何？カートリッジラベル？何のやつ？
Around here, you will find some of Sam's Super Nintendo cartridges that she left behind.
あったあった、確かあったよ。
For legal reasons, we couldn't put real games in, and so we conscripted a few of our friends in the industry who are really talented artists to make cool label art for fake Nintendo games that we came up with.
It's so true. The first one was Super Spitfire, and that was by Rachel Morris, who is a cool artist. What is it? The NYU?
The NYU Game Center. She's done a bunch of like posters and other art for them.
And then the next one was Adventurous Cat Returns, which is it's sort of a.
It's a mascot platformer. It's a Bubsy-esque dude having cat.
Oh yeah, but it's a regular cat. It's not a bald cat.
Yeah, it's a regular cat that rides a motorcycle towards an explosion.
Yeah.
But yeah, Lee Petty is the art director at Double Fine and worked on Brutal Legend, and I think he led up Stacking, and awesome. He was nice enough to spend some of his free time making the label for Adventurous The Cat Returns.
Yeah, we ran into him at GDC, and he offered to help us out, and we were all like, cool.
We were like, oh, you didn't think we'd take you up on that offer, did you? Draw us a cat.
Yeah, he regretted the error of his ways. And then the third one is Journey of Crystal, which is sort of a JRPG beast, and that was done by Gen Z.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's the art director at Supergiant. She did pretty all of the art in Bastion, and is working on Transistor. I know we had some people say that they could tell that it was her art because it has such a signature look,
It's pretty distinctive.
to how she does things. So it was really cool and really exciting to have these really talented people from other studios that are inspirations to us contribute their unique art to the game.
確かに著作権の理由でカートリッジの絵、多分これだよね。この絵。新規に描いてもらったんだね。費用もかかりそう。ただね、このスーパースピットファイアとかこういうゲーム全然知らないんですけど、アメリカだと多分有名なんだろうなと思うんだけど、ストリートファイターもこのゲームの中にできたんで、そっちだったらまだわかると思うんだけどな。これもアメリカのゲームなのかな。日本で見たことないんだけど、ステレオグラム
So these are stereographic? Stereoscopic? Yeah, these are stereograms.
Yeah,
That's the
stereogrammatic.
Yeah. Stereograms, popularized by the Magic Eye brand of images from, the 80s and 90s. These really work. Like, if you cross your eyes and you can do a Magic Eye image, you can see what's in these. Spoilers. They are.
Well, as I recall, there's a cool shark.
And?
I don't remember what the other one is.
Carla!
What?
It's a big heart.
Okay, it's hard for me to do those things.
And that's true for a lot of people. So the two instances of people not being able to see those images are they just can't do them, which a lot of people just can't do them, or they were born in the late 90s or after the 90s and played our game and didn't know what the hell these things were.
Yeah, they're like, what is this weird static shit? Yeah.
Well, I thought it was like we got some messages that were like, I thought it was just a weird drawing.
So good.
So, yes, as you get older, you can't hear really high-pitched sounds anymore, and you know what Magic Eyes are still.
It's the circle of life.
いやいや、今でもね、こういう騙し絵みたいな絵ってあるよ。隠し絵とかってやつ。なんかね、本でね、まとまって、いくつも絵がね、まとめられているんだけど、サメとハートがあるって言った、大きなハートがあるって言ったんだけど、多分これ大きなハートがね、隠されているってことだと思うんだけど、すいません、全く見えないんですけど、本当にこれ本当にハートある？大きなハート。全然見えないよ。これゲームだから、これは多分ね、サメの絵が隠されてるってことだと思うんだけど、これ最初にね、ゲームでこの部屋に来てみたときも、多分なんか隠し絵があるんだろうなと思って、しばらく見たんだけど、何もわからなかったんだけど、今コメンタリーで答えを聞いた後でもね、何も見えない。大きなハートなんてどこにもないんですけど、これ人によって本当に見える？これがサメらしいんだけど、そう。これゲーム、実際の方じゃなくてゲームの画面で見るから、それが見えてこないとかあんのかな？いや、でもそんなことある？ちょっとおかしいよ、これ。これ本当にみんな見えんの？スティーブ・カーラ、進行、これのこと？変なバインダーのこと？
Mom and Dad are much more actively religious. You know, there's a Bible in the foyer, and there's a Bible in Dad's bedside table.
Well, or arguably they want to appear actively religious. But yes.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, my intent was that they aren't super religious, but they probably still go to church.
And they also they would feel bad if they put their Bibles away. They'd be like, oh, we need those to be out for us to look at, to consult in case we need them, or something.
But it's definitely, I don't know, it comes from my own experience of my parents went to church and were more religious and stuff, and as, I don't know, around when I was like 10 or 12 or something, I was just sort of like, I remember having a conscious realization of just, none of this makes any sense. like I was like, this is all about a guy who was dead and then came back from the dead. That doesn't happen. Magic isn't real.
Wow.
And then there was a process of like just being like, okay, well, I'm just not going to go to church. I also remember having a conscious realization that the only reason I wanted to go to church was because after the service they gave you free donuts.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine.
And so I don't know. It's probably just partially me projecting and trying to show that Sam is re-examining her own values as she gets older and grows out of childhood and doesn't necessarily share the same beliefs that her parents do.
I never tried really hard to, like, I don't know, actually, yeah, I don't know, it was normal church behavior. Like, I would go and, like, help out with, my younger siblings, and, like, my parents always went to church and whatever, and I'd go along, and there was, like, a couple of people that I knew there and everything, but it took me until I was about, I think I was, like, 13 or 14, and I spent a significant amount of time really trying to, like, to be like, alright, I'm gonna do this church thing, I'm gonna try really hard, and I would, like, get annoyed at people when they said, oh my god, and stuff, because I thought that was what you were supposed to do, and I think it was, I don't know, lasted, like, whatever, 6 or 8 months or something, and then it broke, and I couldn't do it anymore, and I forget what I did something, I ruined something, in the church through total, not caring. I built I remember now, I built a house of cards out of a Bible trivia
like flashcard
set.
Yeah.
Well, it was just like Trivial Pursuit, except it was Bible based. And I built like this big house of cards, and at one point I remember thinking, alright, fuck it, and I glued the cards into place. So I had this big house of cards that was glued together, totally like ruining all the goddamn cards. And at that point, I stopped having to go to church so much.
そんな癖があった？でも確かにね、両親の家とか部屋とかに、引き出しのところにすぐ聖書とかって置かれてたんだよね。でも、サムはこういう段ボールの中に聖書を入れて、もう全然見ることがなかったんで、そういう成長というか、両親とは違うよねっていうところを暗示していたんですね。でちなみにね、僕はこのコメンタリーって、大体全部見るのに1時間くらいかなと思ったんだけど、ひょっとしてこれ、すごい長いの？なんかね、このコメンタリー一個一個ね、結構雑談、開発者の人が雑談してて、長いんだけど、いっか。この開発者のコメンタリーって、こういうもんだよね。こういうお遊びのおまけみたいなもんだから、のんびり見ようかな。ボードゲーム、これね。この電話番号ゲット、これね、聞いたことないっす。こんなボードゲームあんの？人生ゲームぐらいじゃないの？
One of the assets that I really liked creating in the game were these board games. So there's 3 in total of them throughout the house. Ideally there'd be more, but we had to focus on getting the balls built and things like that. But I really like them. They're just a simple extruded cube. There's something about environment design that's really fun. There's really a goofy aspect of it where you have to create fake brand names. You have to create fake toys and fake storefronts. Maybe my favorite is in the game Costume Quest, when you're going through the shopping mall, there's a store called Why Not Flip Flops, which always makes me really happy. But this one is a parody of Dream Phone, which is an awful game that came out in the early 90s, where you sit around a table with your girlfriends and you pick up this plastic pink phone and call these sexy boys, and you see which one likes you. It doesn't really suit Sam's personality exactly, but I figure maybe it was given to her by a well-intentioned relative who doesn't quite have her personality down, and maybe she played it once on a lark and then put it in the closet, and that's where it stays.
結構この小物一つ一つに開発者の人いろんな想像してるね。普段そういうもんなのかな。このゲームはね、そんなに長く大規模なゲームじゃないから、開発者の人も、小物一つ一つ一つに意味を考えながら配置してるのかなと思うんだけど、普通そこまで意識して配置できないと思うんだよね。でもそういうものなの？開発者の人って。そこまで意識するの大変だけど、これ何？浪人の写真ね。 あ、これロニーですね。サブの恋人の。で、赤い髪の毛してるんだけど、多分これを見て、サムも赤く髪を染めようとしてるんですね。
Yeah, I ended up being pretty happy with this. This is the only picture of Lonnie that we had for a really long time, and I was really glad to actually come up with something that we liked, since this kind of thing is really hard, especially when it is such a major character. The other thing is, Lonnie has a cross necklace. She also has some Catholicism in her family.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I don't think that particular detail has been called out by anybody. People notice like the Bibles and whatnot, but yeah, I intended for Lonnie, like I thought it would be interesting if she came from a more conservative family than Sam's, in that she actually wears a cross necklace and carries some, you know, Catholicism with her, and her dad was an army guy, and you know, her background is even in some ways maybe kind of more stifling than Sam's, and that's probably why she's a more like openly rebellious person on the outside.
ちょっとこの十字架あるんだったらもっとちゃんと目立つように書いて、もう少し下の方まで、首の下の方まで写真撮ってほしいんだけど、これ十字架首から下げてるって分かんなかった。で、クリスチャンで結構厳格な家族に育ったんですね。これ分かんないよ、これ。十字架あるなんて。で、この部屋はね、もうコメンタリーはないね。なんこれ。これなんだっけ。これ何の話？トットっていうもう一人友達がいるっていう話もしたね。ハムとロニーの文字ね。
Barf Burger is enjoyed by all. So the thing is, I drew the Barf Burger because I drew all of Lonnie's drawings. So I drew the two cats on the motorcycle and the Captain Allegra drawings and stuff like that. And that was really I think that it goes hand in hand with, I did Lonnie's handwriting in the game, and Carla did Sam's handwriting. And that was partly because the two of us were going to be working the most closely on this stuff, and so being able to just quickly like rewrite a note that we wanted to change and scan it and update the game and not have to like email somebody to say, oh, could you write that again or whatever, was really useful. And also we both just happened to have sloppy teenager handwriting that looks believably 17 years old. Also, I have a believably 17-year-old level of drawing skill, so that worked too. But it was fun because basically the notes were created in real life in essentially the same way they were in the fiction, where I would write my part of the note and then hand the piece of paper to Carla and she would write her part of the note, and we just constructed it that way.
これね、実際の手紙のやり取りと時系列を合わせて手紙を書いていたっていうの、これ面白いね。その方が確かに雰囲気イメージしてね、書く手にも気持ち入るね。この文章ね、ロニーの字はスティーブが書いたって言ってるんだけど、赤い字の方ね、女性が書いたような字かどうかよくわかんない。男性が書いたって言っても別に違和感ない。ちょっと丸っこい感じはするね。あるよね。当然ここあるよね。人の手による温かさっていうか、絶対ね、この赤いペンキのことをコメントをしてくれると思ったんだけど、違うの？
I mean, one of the most comforting things in the world to me is having somebody like brush my hair or stroke my head. Like my mom, when I wasn't feeling well, I could lie down in her lap, she would just brush my hair. It would always make me feel better. Like the weirdest way, I couldn't figure out why, but it just seemed like this friendly connection to somebody that it is, like she says, it is strangely intimate in a way that I'd not really, I guess, put into words until reading that part of the script. Where that's what I was thinking of, was like that connection, that sort of human touch, that it's something so friendly and so loving that you can do. And that whole idea of like touching someone's scalp being so intimate, it just made me think of that. Just those wonderful little moments where just a touch can be so much more.
いや、ちょっといい話を聞かせてくれてるんだけど、それよりもこの髪留めのね、赤い血みたいな感じになったっていう、そこの制作秘話を聞かせてくれると思ったんだけど、そっちの方が聞きたいんだけど、これ、開かないの？この中にあるっていうことはないね。ちょっとね、なんかいっぱいあるよ、いっぱいあるよ。どこにも。そして、今度こそこの赤い血のやつ話聞ける？生理用品、違う。
The boxes of tampons that you can find in the washrooms around the house, they weren't originally on the list of items that needed to be modeled, but when you're creating a bathroom at that level of fidelity, and when you're creating a bathroom for a teenage girl, no less, the idea of not having something like that is kind of jarring. It was kind of jarring to me, especially because when you're at that age, your period is something that kind of really defines your mood at any given day, and maybe what you wear and where you go. So, I just thought it was, something necessary for visual storytelling, especially of a girl going through what she's going through.
これはね、ちょっと実際にゲームやってる時は言いづらかったんだけど、こういうとのリアリティはね、これ結構良かったと思うね。確かにこの部屋って、サムの寝室に面しているとこなんで、確かにサムのが使っているとこだよねっていうのは、すぐにパッとイメージ湧いたね。スティーブ&カーデザイン哲学。ひょっとして、これの話、これ、別に、これ、デザイン関係ある？デザイン哲学をこれから話してくれるんだけど、特にね、この部屋でデザイン哲学を強調するようなものってなんかあるかな？できるだけリアリティに凝ってるっていうことだと思うんだけど。
A lot of Gone Home is about pointless interactivity that is sort of things being interactive for the sake of them being interactive, but it really comes from our inspirations of immersive sims like System Shock and Bioshock and Thief, where a big part of the design philosophy behind those games and Gone Home is that the world needs to be really internally consistent, and there's this feeling that if there's something that your character might do, you should be able to do it in the game. So in Bioshock, for instance, you can flush all the toilets and you can turn on all of the faucets, and that's also true in like Deus Ex and Dishonored. And sometimes like the water fountains in Deus Ex give you like 1 health or whatever, but really you can interact with them because there's this expectation of, if you could interact with that, if you encountered it in this world, we should let you do that, right? So all of the faucets in our game can be turned on, and they can be turned on so that you can turn them on and you can flush all of the toilets, and it extends into our philosophy behind you can pick up every plastic cup and toothbrush and Kleenex box, not because it's going to add a whole lot to your understanding of this world to be able to look at the underside of a cup, but to pay off that expectation and say to the player, yeah, you could pick that up and look at it, so we're going to let you do that, and it's going to be consistent interactively with the stuff that is important, and that makes it your job to look at everything and give it your attention, and for you to decide and understand and figure out what has significance and what doesn't, and not for us to tell that to you.
これは確かにデザイン哲学だった。ちょっといい話聞けた。なるほどね。これね、ユーザーが行うね、入試則の話だね。アクションとかの影響力の話ね。でもね、それをね、リアリティを求めて徹底するっていうのはね、最近のゲームだと結構少ないね。 できるだけね、ユーザーにめんどくさいっていうことを与えない、感情を与えないで、サクサクゲームを、特にスマホゲーとかそうなんだけど、そういう感じで単純化して余計な手間をかきさせないようにしてると思うから、こういうね、ゲームデザインっていうのゲームはね、少数派だと思う。このゲームはね、こんな感じでさっきもコメントをしたように、ランダムこうやってぐるぐるっと巻いて来たりするんで、ちょっとユーザーが撮ってみたいなと思った時に、すぐにそれできるんですよね。ただこれは確かにゲームの進行には何の影響も与えませんと。今の若い人たちはね、こういうゲームはめんどくさいっていうふうに思うと思うね。これを楽しめるっていうのはね、結構少ないかもしんないな。こういうね、細かなデザインがね、インターフェースがね、面白いんだよね。この没入感を与えるんですよね。で、ここが、今度はね、両親の部屋ですね。コメンタリーある？あれ？すいません、コメンタリーない？あった。これね。ミトン。これ。これね、この家族が飼っていた猫なんだよね。で、いつ死んだかっていうのは分かんないんだけど、多分もういないはずですね。じゃあ猫の話か。ここのコメンタリーがあるとすると、このね、引き出しが出しっぱなしになってる、この理由の話かなと思ったんだけど、
One of my favorite things that came out during development was someone wrote an email mistakenly referring to mittens, and Steve replied in the voice of Katie, saying, "It's just Mitten. She's only one cat, Mom."
そんだけ？それもちょっと面白い裏話ではあるんだけど、ちょっともっとミトンの設計の話とか、この引き出しの話とか聞きたかった。この引き出しの中にコメンタリーが入ってるってことないよね。ないね。次がね、ここなんだっけ。夫婦の寝室のそこにあるクローゼットだね。幽霊の由来。幽霊？ひょっとして、このゲームの中でちょくちょくポルターガイスト現象とかあった話がついに来る？あれこれ。これボードゲームね。そう、確かこれ見てね、この屋敷のことに近いよねというふうに思ったんですよね。
Another board game. This one wasn't done by me though. This one was done by Carla. But I really like it because the ghost figures on the back of the game are actually long deceased family members of mine. When I was home at Christmas, I was digging through my family's basement, sort of getting an idea of what a basement has in it, just sort of for set dressing purposes. And while I was down there, I found a big box that my family actually hadn't seen. We got a big box of things from my grandmother after she passed away. And inside this box was all these tin types, love letters and sort of emigration papers and notes from as far back as the 1850s when my family had emigrated from Scotland and Ireland. And I asked my family if it was possible that I include these in some sort of artistic project, and they said sure. They gave me their blessing, and I scanned them. And I didn't know if they were actually going to make it in the game, but then I saw that Carla had made this game, and really liked that they showed up as ghosts on the back of it. And it's sort of, I think, a nod for Idle Thumbs listeners who really feel quite passionately about ghosts, as it turns out. Surprise!
結局幽霊はいなかったか。で、これ実際の写真を取り込んだって言ってたね。別のゲームでもね、実際の写真を取り込んで、家中にその写真を貼ってるっていうゲームもあったね。意外とそういうのも OK なんだね。で、これは靴？靴ないんですけど、そういえば、靴ないね。なんで靴ない？
So there's a lot less density in the house than there would be in a real house. Like if you look around your house, there's just junk piled everywhere. Probably
Maybe
like
it's just our house.
I think it's most house.
Oh, you're right.
But So, our strategy was you either fully invest in something and, put like a plausible representation of this aspect of a room in, or you just don't put it in at all. And the player will fill in the gaps between like, oh, these are all the things that represent the kind of room I'm supposed to be in, and it doesn't jump out at me that there's no toilet plungers in the bathroom or whatever. But the biggest instance of this that I think actually totally worked, because no one has ever called it
Yeah, I
out,
know.
is, surprise, think about it, there are no shoes in this house. Ta-da!
Where's your brain now?
and I don't think anybody's noticed it, and I think it's because if we had put one pair of shoes or two pairs of shoes, people would have said, where are all the rest of the shoes?
Right.
But really, to have a plausible house, Mom would have to have 10 pairs of shoes and her work boots, and Dad would need to have some tennis shoes and some work shoes, and so on and so forth. So we just said, there aren't going to be any shoes, and we hope nobody notices.
ああ、そこは手抜きしたか。まあ、開発が大変だったっていう感じなんだろうね。で、この隠し戸はちゃんと開くんですね。で、こっちがね、夫婦の、浴室とか洗面台とかなんだよね。で、ここには何もありません。本当にない。あれこの浴室、コメンタリーがないね。絶対、これに関する話があると思ったんだけど、このハネムーンの後でってことで、パートナーの性格、心性、性的魅力を見つめ直す。多分ね、テレンスさんとね、あれだっけ、ジャニス、お父さんとお母さんね、最近そういう行為をしなくて、それって倦怠期になってたと思うんで、それを何とかしようとしているっていうことを示唆するためにこの本を置いたと思ったんだけど、そういうコメンタリーがない。絶対それを意図してるって思ったのに。で、ここが来客室になっていて、で、ケイティに割り当てられてるんですよね。偶然の産物
Almost none of the events, the little events in the game, are scripted as far as like triggering when you do something specific. So all of the thunder and lightning and the creaky noises in the house, they're all just randomized on timers. The only like scripted thing is in the secret passageway. When you look at the crucifix, there's scripting that detects that you did that, and then it causes the light to pop, which is my one indulgence of like messing
あれは
with
ね、
the player.
結構驚いた
But we've
ね。
had a lot of people play the game and say, oh, the way you scripted it so that right when I walked into the TV room, there was that big thunder and lightning strike. Like, that was really spooky. Or I walked through that one door and then you played that sound behind me. And it's like, it's awesome that the combination of all the different kind of like significant actions you can do in the game,
Right.
like crossing into a new room or opening a door or this, that, or the other thing, and the randomization of stuff can make it seem like the random elements have extra significance to them, but in fact it's like you just got lucky, basically.
Yeah, it's total apophenia because, it's just because there's enough random things going on, and you can do enough things that eventually some of them are going to line up,
Yeah.
which is cool.
確かにね、雷とかっていうのはランダム性があるなと思ってて、で、電球が壊れるっていうのは、あそこはちょっとびっくりしたんだよね。あからさまにあれ、幽霊が出たかなと思ったんで、で、ここにはもうそれしかないね。で、こっちが絵を描く部屋なんだけど、あるね。これ何？カセットテープ。この話？そう、必ずね、部屋にカセットテープがあると、再生できるプレイヤーもその部屋の中に置いてるんだよね。多分その話をするんだと思いますね。
I really enjoyed playing Gone Home. I have to say it was pretty exciting to find the Heavens to Betsy tape, you know, because that was really, I mean, those songs really did come out on a cassette tape at the time, and that really was how people discovered the music was getting a cassette tape passed around. So getting to put it in the actual tape player and play it and listen to our song, it definitely gave me chills. I mean, it was like, wow, you know, how exciting for a young person today to get that moment of discovery and to listen to our music. I mean, I think it's great.
全然違った。でもね、この開発に関わった人たちが昔バンドやっていて、その曲をこのゲームの中に取り込んだって、それちょっとエモいね。その采配なかなかいいね。ちょっと待って、ここ絶対コメンタリーつけるところでしょ。この絵について、開発の裏話聞きたいんだけど、一応ね、このロニー、こういう絵って、スティーブが描いたっていうのが前のコメンタリーだったんだけど、いや、こここそコメンタリー必要でしょう。裏話聞きたかったんだけどな。じゃあこの2階はね、全部コメンタリー見たよね。じゃあね、今度は、これ見たやつだよね。そうそう、ストーリーで進んだ順番に見ていくんだけど、ここから地下に降りていって、これね、引いたらね、これだったかな、なんかしたらこれがつかなくなるんだよね。これだ。十字架を取る。違う？あれ普通につくんだけど。何したら消えるって言ったっけ？そういえば、ここコメンタリーない。いや、この秘密の通路ね、壁にね、こういう、当時の、結構昔のね、ファッション雑誌の切り抜きみたいな紙がいっぱい貼ってあるんだよね。これ、多分メイソンさん、この家の元の持ち主のメイソンさんの趣味だと思うんだけど、なんでこんなん貼ったっていう話でいいか、聞けると思ったんだけど、ここも求めていたところなんだけど、ないんですけど。ちょっと待って、ひょっとして、この隠しのところもなんかあったりする？ないね。じゃあね、今度は地下室だね。そうそう、メインストーリーやってすごいもう、こっから地下室に行ったんですよね。ちょっと聞きたかったところにコメンタリーないのちょっとショックだな。ちょっと待って、やっぱりこれ、結構ね、時間かかる気がする。1時間どころじゃないんだけど、これ。環境音楽。環境音楽？
Composing the ambient exploration tracks definitely ended up being the weirdest part of creating music for Gone Home. The audio diaries tended to take precedence since they had such clear criteria for completion, so the ambient tracks were the last things I did. I spent so long immersed in the logs, which were very specifically timed, that to suddenly shift gears to creating these slow, standalone 5-minute pieces was surprisingly difficult. I remember giving Steve a first stab at the ambient track for part 2 of the game, and I didn't hear anything back about it. When I eventually asked if he had any feedback, he said something like, "Oh yeah, it's great, I just slowed it down by 50% and it totally works," which cracked me up, because I definitely didn't have that in mind. But that's one of the great things about collaborative work, so I just went with it. I ended up doing a number of further revisions where I'd alter elements of the original version specifically to affect how the 50% slowed version would sound. It was definitely a new experience for me, writing bits of music and trying to imagine how they would sound after it's been considerably distorted. It got weirder though. The ambient track for part 1 ended up being a backwards version of the slowed down part 2 track. And again, there were elements that sounded good at 50% slow forwards, but not at 50% slow backwards. So again, I went back to the original track and started altering elements so they would sound better at half speed in reverse. I don't know if that's a thing ambient composers end up getting used to, but for me it definitely felt like going down the rabbit hole.
それで違和感ない曲になるの？ まあ、確かにね、このゲームの、普通に動いて、移動している時の曲って、全く目立たないんだよね。音楽は全く印象に残らない。全然ね、主張しないんだよね。このゲーム、カセット、カセットテープに入ったり、レコードに入ってる、まあ、90年代の曲っていうのは、すごい主張するんだけど、それ以外のバックミュージックとか、まあ、さっきこの人が言っていた日記喋るときについているバックミュージックとかって、あるのか何か分かんなくて、主張しないんだよね。あ、本当に、もうディレクターさんかな、まあ、そういうイメージで、音楽をお願いしてるんですね。ちなみにね、作曲家の人って勝手に再生スピードを半分にされたとか3分に使われたとか言ったら気を悪くしたりしないのかな。俺の想定していた曲じゃないんだけどっていうふうに怒ったりしないのかな。地下室の、あ、これ、そう、これ聞きたかった。これね、地下室でこのローがね、つきっぱなしなんだよね。これなんで火を落としてないの？どういうこと？
One of the larger assets that we needed for the basement to really give it character and personality was a furnace. And when we were initially thinking of the furnace, Steve had mentioned to me the furnace from Home Alone, which if you grew up in the 90s like I did, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I did a lot of research and looked up stuff that could kind of evoke a similar feeling. And we finally settled upon octopus furnaces, which are like, they're thematically and time-wise very appropriate. They're these giant hulking monstrosities with all these arms covered in asbestos. Really perfect, so we ended up modeling one of those and put it in the corner, and I think it turned out okay.
あれ、すみません、これ、アスベストで覆われてんの？アスベストってね、体に悪いってすごい、言われてるやつなんですけど、まあ、1995年ってそこら辺ってよく分かってなかったんだっけ？確か、10年ぐらい前にアスベストがすごい問題になって話題になったと思ったそれからもう使われなくなったっていうことになんなかったっけ？で、これ95年なんで、今からまあ20年ぐらい前だと思うんだけど、その頃はバンバン使われてたんだって、どこがアスベストよくわかんないんだけど、見た目。普通の金属に見えるんだけど、この話ないの？すいません、これもコメンタリー聞きたかったんだけど、これね、おじいちゃんのリチャード・グリーンブライア博士の肖像画なんだけど、顔がね、破られてるんだよね。多分ね、テレンスさんが、この人に、お父さんに自分の書いた小説を送って、で、このリチャード博士が批評して帰ってきたんだけど、それが気に入らなくて、歌ゲーム俺のやりたいようにやるんだって感じで、肖像画の顔をね、切り取ったんだと思ったんだけど、その裏話聞きたかったんですけど、お母さんは悲しい。ああ、そうそうそう。これ確かね、お母さんのジャニスがね、アメリカに帰化したって言ってるんだけど、どこの国から帰化したかって分かんなかったんだよね。カナダなんだ。
Oh man, this thing.
So two things. One, Mom's Canadian.
Yay!
Two, Mom didn't start out Canadian. The reason that Mom is Canadian is because Kate Craig and Emily Carroll are Canadian, and early on in the development of the game, Emily did Mom's handwriting.
This is before she did any of the UI text during the
Right, and it was before we decided that all the moms were going to actually be written by moms and all that kind of stuff.
Integrity in moms.
And so we had the answering machine note in the foyer, and there the line, what's the actual line that's there? It's like
Neighborhood.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
So the line on the thing is like Daniel from the old neighborhood call him back, and we gave the text to Emily, and she wrote it out longhand and gave it back to us. And then I looked at it, I realized that she had inserted a U into the word neighborhood
Because it's what you do.
because of
Canada.
being Canadian. And so to fix that bug, instead of removing the U, I said, "Bug fixed. Mom is now Canadian."
そんなきっかけでお母さんが噛んだから気がしたっていう話作ったの？これね、なんかお母さんの背景にいろいろ、今のお母さんがいなくなった理由に関係するのかなと思ったんだけど、何の関係もなかった。そういうね、小物的な小さなアクセントがね、物語を楽しくするんですね。で、こっちがね、使用人数なんだけど、なんかいっぱいあるよ、これ。姉の視点。これ、あれでしょ、これ。このメモがね、サムが書いたロニーとイチャイチャしてるところを自分で書いたんですよね。どういう心理かなと思うんだけど、でそれをこのケイティ、主人公が見て、見ちゃダメって感じで、ちょっとしかね、見せてくれないんだけど、それね。
So there's this little scrap of paper that's hidden under this bedside table, and you start to read it, and then Katie makes you stop reading it. And it was this thing where it's an exception to the interactive expectations that you have. Like, it's one place, I guess the one place where we really impinge on your ability as a player to do what you want. And Katie intervenes basically, and it was something that I thought was an interesting little one-off way of emphasizing the difference between the player and the character that they're playing as. And to you as a player, the note's just a note, but a reminder that, like, Sam is Katie's sister, and Katie wouldn't want to read this thing, and she's not going to keep doing it even if you want her to.
このね、演出はちょっと意外で面白かったね。でも、操縦してるのはケイティで、ちゃんと操縦しているケイティでも自分の意思がありますよっていうのを主張してるんですね。よくね、全く主人公喋らないとか、意思表示をしないっていう主人公多いんだけど、そこはちょっと違いますよって感じですね。で、ライオットがある。これ、多分また、当時のバンドでしょ、きっと。
You know, there was kind of this intellectual, cross-cultural, like pen pal thing that happened before the internet. You know, we used to write letters back and forth to each other about our ideas and about how we wanted to change things. And so a bunch of these women that I mentioned came up with this idea of Riot Girl, of being a punk rocker that was also in your face feminist.
すみません、ライオットがあるって全然知らないんですけど、バンド名ガールスカウト。ひょっとしてアメリカの方で有名な、
Todd's band lost
待
their
って、
singer.
なんかサモン西始まっ
Todd
た。
said he sucked. Lonnie said he got sick of Todd's shit.
これなん
And
か
he
ロ
was
ニーが
complaining about needing a
バ
new
ンドを
singer.
始め
So
たところ
Lonnie
です
was
ね。
like, I can sing. And they were all kind of like, you can? And
で
she
こっ
was
ちなん
like,
かある。
probably.
次は特になんもない
But she's
ね。
been rehearsing with them for like a week now. And I finally got to see
多
them
分
play
ね、
in
こ
Todd's
れ、
basement today.
この日記の喋りって止まらないんだよね。
Amazing. I feel so
なんも
proud
ない。
when she's on stage. It's incredible being in awe of someone you love. So everybody knows it's like a temporary situation till she ships out in June. But till then, I'm gonna be at every single show.
例えばサムが語ってるんだけど、その前にね、僕この話知りたかったんだけど、これ金庫の中に入っている手紙で、おじいさんの、この家の元の持ち主のオスカー・メイさんがお姉さんに宛てた手紙で、なんかすごい前に大変なことをしたんだけど、ちょっと許して、僕のことを無視しないでっていうふうに言ったんだけど、結局差出人いなくて届かなくて返送されてきたんだよね。で結局このオスカー・メイさんに何があってこの屋敷で一人に暮らすことになったのかっていうのがね分かんなかったんだけど、ここにコメンタリーがないの、それ知りたかったんだけど、 このわけのわかんないライオットがあるよりも、そっちが知りたいんだけど、で、これは演技に関する指示。あ、これは声優さんの多分演技、これもなんかあるよ。
There's a little bit of concern on my part before any of this got started that you never know how much liberty you're going to be given and how much over direction you're going to get because somebody hears it like a specific way, and if you deviate from that at all, you're just going to keep doing the line over and over and over again, like 50 times until it's right. So I really wasn't sure what to expect, but even on the first day getting in there and being able to go through a few of the lines and just give them what came to mind, and seeing how closely I think everyone was on the page about it. So the direction was always really positive, and it was always kind of coming from either additional information that changed the context of what I was reading, or a certain change in the phrasing or the way something is being, a pause here, or maybe move it to here, or instead of emphasizing this word, try this one instead. So you end up with a lot of different takes that really give it a very different feeling depending on which one you go for.
この話はね、現実はこれも現実なんだけど、よく聞く話ですね。声優さんとか実際舞台で演技をする人とかってどこまでしたらいいかっていうのを、結構採用を任せてくれる人も多いんだけどね。元の場所、これ、4年マン
Putback is the feature that I'm happiest with in the game. It actually came about as sort of a little bit of an
あ
accident.
手に取ったアイテムを元の
Playtesters
場所
told
に
us they didn't
戻せるん
want
だよ
to
ね。
feel like some kind of horrible person rummaging around this house and tossing everything on the floor. But there wasn't really any other option initially. That's all you could do was sort of try and lob things back into the place. So, I had done some code before for placing turrets and things in other games where it, will arbitrarily orient an object to be perpendicular to surface and all that sort of stuff. I told Steve that, we'd have a lot of edge cases with that and it would take some time to implement, and temporarily I would just give him the ability to put objects that these things would kind of stick to in the game, and we tried that, and it worked so well that we decided to keep that, and that's where Putback came from.
これは意見が分かれるとこなんじゃない？本当にね、元の場所に戻さなくても、本当に取ったらもうどこでも置いて、そのままの場所を位置しといてくださいっていう方がリアリティが上がるっていう風に考えるかもしれないね。そうそう、こうやってね、元の場所に戻すと、最初の位置にちゃんと戻ってくれるんだよね。整理整頓できてるっていう感じはするんだけど、これは、どっちがいいかっていうのは悩むね。個人的にはね、元の場所に戻さなくてもいいかもしれない。でもこれって、でもどうなんだろう。そうすると、オブジェクトごとに、現在の位置の情報とか傾きの情報を持っておかないといけないから、メモリーたくさん食うのかな。でもこのゲームってそんなにオブジェクトの数多くないと思うから、多分ね、破綻するようなメモリーにならないと思うんで、多分大丈夫だね。こういうオブジェクトは手に持ってないんで、手に持って位置を変えられるアイテムってそんなに多くないと思うんだよね。そんなの多くないって言っても100個くらいありそうな気がするんだけど。で、また1階に戻ってきますよと。で、ここが、隠し部屋になってるんだよね。あるね。ここは何？ジン。お酒のジンかな。あれ、ジンあったっけ？
Fanzines. I mean, that's one of the things that we started doing right away. Was
ジンって
doing
同
these
人誌の
what
こと
I
な
call
の？
fanzines, and everyone would contribute and write, an article for it, and then we'd compile it and make these Riot Girl fanzines, and we would mail them out to people. I mean, all this is so funny to talk about it before the internet, but we used the mail, and people would write. We had a PO box, and we started getting letters because people would read in someone else's fanzine. There's this Riot Girl thing that started happening, right? And it just, I mean, it was the most incredible thing. It just snowballed. Girls wanted to be a part of it immediately across the country, right? So from the time we started Heavens to Betsy in 1991, I think it was only a year later, right? So 1 year of Riot Girl meetings and these letters happening and these fanzines happening. Well, a year later, we left on the Riot Girl tour, the Heavens to Betsy Ratmobile Riot Girl tour, from Olympia to DC. Well, for some reason, it took us like almost 5 weeks to get there on this tour. And we ended up staying in DC another something like 5 weeks before the Riot Girl convention that happened. So that all of this, all of these fanzines, all these girls across the country started getting interested in Riot Girl, and the press just went bananas. I mean, the press attention was off the hook. New York Times, USA Today, all these journalists wanted information and wanted to interview all of us. And it was crazy. So by the time we got to the Riot Girl convention, suddenly we were truly part of a movement.
あれひょっとしてライオットガール、これヘブンズ・トゥ・ベッジってやつだよね。違うか。これがひょっとしてライオットガールかなと思ったんだけど、これ別だね。でもヘブンズ・トゥ・ベッジってこれだね。じゃあ現実の世界をこのゲームの中にもいろいろ反映してるんだね、これも。ちなみにジンっていうのが同人誌って今初めて知りましたね。で、こっからね、1階の東側に来たんだよね。これ何？フロリダ？
So earlier in an earlier version of the story in Gone Home, Sam and Lonnie got caught together, and Lonnie's dad was like an asshole about it and threatened to send Lonnie to live with her mom in Florida. And we cut that. It was too melodramatic and it wasn't really interesting. It was an external force that was acting on them, which I wasn't super excited about in practice and so on and so forth. But it caused there to be this concept of Lonnie's mom living in Florida, which
Florida is, of course, the worst place that you can live.
Well, let's not assume. But that said, it's the other side of the country, and it's totally so foreign from Oregon and everything. Also, it's where I grew up.
Yeah, that was.
So yes, the reason I think that Lonnie's mom lives in Florida is that I grew up in Florida, and I moved from Florida to Oregon when I was like 19, and I've been back to visit, but if someone were to say to me, "Hey Steve, do you want to go back and live in Florida?" I would take a sheet of notebook paper and I would write no on it, as big as you can get, and
with
hand it back to
gravestones.
you. There would be knives, there would be gravestones, there would be
Dead
lightning,
face.
big X's in the eyes, vampire teeth for some reason.
I was largely unfamiliar with Florida, and my family started going there every once in a while, or when I was like in high school for Christmas, because my mom hates being cold. And
Pick the wrong goddamn place to live, Mrs. Zamanja.
Yeah, well, but anyway, the only thing that I remember basically is that everybody had lawn flamingos, and we went around Christmas, so I remember hearing on the radio multiple times dogs barking Christmas carols. That's Florida.
Florida sounds cooler than I remember it being.
In my head, that's Florida, right there.
これ自分が住んでいた地域の話をゲーム設計で盛り込むってのはよくある話ですよね。その関係でね、結構メンバーともね、いろんな地元の話とかよくするんだよね。これをいいね。で、さっきね、外部の力によって、サムとロニーの関係が変わるとかいう話っていうのは、盛り込んだも別に良かったんじゃないかなと思うんだけどね。 これ何？引き戸。あ、これね。あ、そういえば、引き戸って珍しいね。大抵ね、あれ、そういえばそうだ。開くタイプの、こういうドアが多かったんだけど、一応引き戸がね、いくつかあるね。
All of the sliding doors that you see in the game are actually, from a code perspective, drawers. When I made a thing that could slide along a track like that, for the purpose of making drawers, Steve took it and, as designers are wont to do, used it for his own purposes and came up with sliding doors in our game.
あ、そんだけ？これ、最初見るときね、引き戸とこういう普通に開く扉の違いとか、まあ、1995年当時にどっちが多かったかとは、そういう設定の話をするとは思ったんだけど、あ、このところ結構あるね。これ何？サムを書くということ。これ人物像の話かな。
Writing Sam was a unique challenge, just in the sense of, on the one hand, it was very much from my personal experience because it's about being a teenager and my memories from that time, you know, as an individual, but also who Sam was and what her experience was. Came about as a result of kind of problem solving that we were doing, that Carla and I were doing, just figuring out what the story and what the conflict in the story was going to be. So, you know, by the time we figured out this was all going to take place in one house, and the conflict was going to be between the members of this family, and it had to be kind of irreconcilable differences that would cause serious drama between the members of this family, you know, we started thinking, what form could that take? You know, could it be that the teenager of the family falls in love with somebody that they're not supposed to and the parents don't agree? And what is the contemporary version of that? And so, you know, we at some point decided that we were going to write Sam as a gay character who had fallen in love with another girl, and what conflict would that cause within the family, right?
And we were excited about that opportunity just because of the paucity of that kind of, you know, narrative in games. And you know, I remember when we came up with that concept, just being like, oh man, this is gonna be good. We actually get to do this, which is really cool. But anyway, we actually, you know, yeah, we had to do a lot of work to make it plausible.
Right. Well, because the other side of it is that, you know, I'm the writer on the game, and on the one hand, a lot of teenage experience is universal, but I also at some point just had that very clear realization of, okay, I have just signed up for writing a gay teenage girl. Two out of the three aspects of that character are not something that I've actually lived through. And so it was impressed upon me, especially like when I was working at Irrational, how important research was to getting your fiction right, whether it's, you know, very practical terms like how something works mechanically, to what the characterization of the individuals in your story might be. And so, you know, my process was reading a lot of blogs about people's actual experiences growing up, being gay and being female, and reading fiction and nonfiction about people's experience, and doing original interviews with people that I knew in my life, and asking them about what they remember about growing up with these experiences, and being able to actually, you know, ask follow-up questions. And I'm really grateful to all the people who have shared their experiences through writing, and who were willing to share their experiences with me, personally, talking to me into a microphone so that I could refer to it later, which is just a huge leap for someone to take, to talk about their own, you know, coming of age and all of those very personal experiences. But, you know, I couldn't have gone into writing this character with just saying, well, I'll just assume that I'll do an okay job and write it however it seems like I should. and instead saying you have to take this seriously and you have to actually reach out to people who have lived it so that when you're writing this character, it represents the experience of people like her in a way that is plausible and respectful and
Authentic.
yeah, that represents them in a way that doesn't cheapen the experience that they've had by relying on cliches or just kind of your expectations as an outsider.
このコメンタリー随分時間かけてるね。で、ちょっと意外だったのが、後付けで、同性愛者だっていう情報、属性をつけたんですね。もともとね、それをテーマにしてこの物語を作ったのかなと思ったんだけど、後付けなんだね。で、それ深みに持たせるために、このスティーブさんっていうのはいろいろそこら辺の情報をいろいろ調べたり、で、インタビューをして、このゲームの中に反映していたんですね。でもね、これちゃんとしとかないとね、この手の話ってね、結構SNS とかでも叩かれたりすることが多いから、声の大きい人多いから、そこは注意を払って作ったのかもしんないね。理想、なんそれ。
You know, it's really about the ideals that we were trying to get across in our music. You know, I think that the move to equality for women and for everyone in the U.S. is something that we all want to be a part of, right? And we used Riot Girl and we used music as the tool for that, you know, and that. But it's really, to me, it's about equality for everyone. That I think is the key, and that's why young people really feel passionate, and they listen to the music and they hear that passion, and that's what they connect with.
で、このコリン・カッターさん、いろいろ音楽のこと言ってるんだけど、このゲームね、あんまり音楽のことちゃんとバックミュージック的なことでしか使ってない気がするんだけど、一応ね、カセットテープとか95年、90年代の曲とかカセットテープ、レコードいっぱいあるんだけど、そんなにね、ゲームの中で目立つ感じにしてないと思うんだよね。で、こっちが、キッチンね。ピザの箱。そうそう、ちょっと待って。この手紙ね、これ、後から気づいたんだけど、クリアした後にね、またもう一度見回って、忘れ物ないかなと思って見たんだけど、これね、読んでなかった。これ、サマースとダニエルは森の中。ちょっと、これじゃない、これじゃない。
Daniel finally came over to get his game. I'd been
この
dreading
日記
it,
の内容。
but he brought this story with him that I wrote when we were little. I started reading it, and then there I was, crying at the kitchen table. He asked what was wrong, and I was thinking about how we used to be friends, how much I'd taken for granted. But instead, I told him about school, and Dad, and Lonnie. And then how sorry I was that I wasn't his friend anymore. He gave me a hug and said it was going to be okay. For some reason, I almost believed him.
そうね、ダニエルってね、この最初ね、サムのストーカーかなと思ったんだけど、全然そんなことなかった。ちょっと申し訳ないっす。全然ストーカーじゃなかった。それとね、どれだっけ。これなかったかな。これね、昔ね、小さい頃にサマンサとダニエルがサムとダニエルが話していて、で、サムが作っている妄想小説のね、女船長と一等航海士がカップルなんだけど、当時はね、一等航海士がダニエルのイメージで打ちたらしいんだよね。それでダニエル男なんで、一等航海士の最初男なんだけど、でね、高校なのかな、サムが年取ってから、 小説の中で、この一等航海士がね、なんか女の子にね、変わっちゃうんだよね。なんか水に入って、なんかラムの2分の1みたいな感じなんだけど、うん。なんで、小さい頃は普通に男の子が好きだったんだけど、途中でなんか女性が好きになるとか、そんな感じなのかもしんない。で、これ、ピザの箱ね。あ、このピザね。あ、この汚いやつ。
When you put out any sort of content about your game online, whether it's screenshots or whether it's gameplay or anything along those lines, you're sort of at the mercy of the internet, and you sort of want to see what people are going to respond to, whether it's positive or negative. Hopefully it's positive. But we put out the screenshot a while back of the TV room, among other screenshots, and there's lots of wonderful comments, and I was really happy about that. But one of the comments that I saw a couple of times was people talking about how greasy this pizza box was. Something I hadn't noticed, so I went back and I checked it. It's a very greasy pizza box. Maybe Sam's into deep dish pizza, who knows? But I'm glad we didn't change it. I'm glad we kept it just as gross as it always was. I like it.
うん、確かにね、これ最初開いた時もちょっと汚いなと思ったよ。これがリアルっぽくていいだと思うんだけど、これ何？キッチン。キッチンね。これのこと？ちょっとこれ分かったよ。途中でね、最初、1年前に引っ越してるはずなのに、なんでこんな状態なのと思ったんだけど、どっかの日記でね、リフォームをしてるんだよね。
For a long time, the kitchen was not going to be mid-renovation the way that it is. And it's one of those things that I think that necessity, a production constraint, actually made this part of the house better than it would have been if we could have just done whatever we wanted. Because for a long time we were like, okay, it's just going to be a kitchen, and so we're going to need a bunch of food, which we ended up making, and we're going to need a bunch of appliances, and we're going to need a bunch of, utensils and a block with kitchen knives in it and all the kind of stuff that would be in a kitchen. And at some point, we just realized we didn't have the bandwidth to, of all the rooms in a house, the kitchen, I think, has the most just one-off, unique thingies in it, because there's all these kitchen appliances and stuff that appear nowhere else in a house. And so at some point we just realized it wasn't going to make sense for us to try to portray that in a literal way. And so I just had the idea, what if I just tore the place apart, and the cabinets were sitting on the ground and the counters were laid up against the wall, and it's an old house, and maybe before the family moved in, the kitchen hadn't been updated since the 50s, and so they decided to redo the kitchen, and they're in the middle of that when you get here. I think that that's hopefully more visually interesting than playing it straight would have been, and B, it allowed us to make this feel like a believable space in a way that we just wouldn't have been able to otherwise.
いや、むしろね、なんか裏があるんじゃないかと思ったよ。1年以上もね、これ台所をちゃんと整備しなかったという風な導入だと思ったので、どういう家族、そもそもここに住んでないんじゃない、これ使ってないってこと？食事どうしたのっていう風に、変にね、ミスリードしとったね。さっきも言ったように、途中で実はリフォームを中止したっていう情報が出てくるんだけどね。で、ここガレージね。もう何の話これ？
Definitely the second half was where a lot more of the emotional weight in the character came out, and that was a lot to handle, but a lot of fun to do too, because I've really not gotten to do a character that actually was so, I guess, emotionally real and so human. It's sort of, you're not doing some commercial selling you thing, or not doing some sort of sci-fi fantasy world sort of story. It was very realistic and very relatable, and you sort of realize that the character's someone that you could know or that you could have been, when you were younger, which I really liked. It was very exciting. The whole experience has been really good.
そんなに変わったっけ？確かにね、途中からロニーの件でサムの演技って緊迫してきたなと、恋愛関係で色ぼけしてきたなって感じしたんだよね。前半はね、 学校のメンバーとなかなか反りが合わなくて、反発的なイメージ持ってたんだけど、それか、これなんだっけ。ロニーのお別れライブの話ね。
Lonnie had her
ま
going
た
away
なんか話
showing
っ
her
ちゃっ
band
た。
tonight. She's so incredible on stage.
で、これが、サラの感情移入の話。こっちなんだっけ。
Everything.
こっちもちゃんとあるね。
That we only had 48 hours left. That I don't
これ
know
っ
what
て
comes
止
next.
められないんだよね。この話聞いた
I
んだけ
can't
ど、
live without her.
あ、
So that was probably the hardest one we had to record. It was part of the second batch of recording we did, and so I had the script a few days before we did the recording to kind of read through it all and get a feel for where the story was going. And then we'd met for lunch to go over everything and see if I had any questions before we went into the studio. And I just right away admitted, like, yep, some part of this script here, like, I will be honest, one of these totally had me crying, like, straight up, totally couldn't help it. Figuring, like, yeah, I had my cry out, it was good, I'll be fine, get to the recording, it'll be great, get it out of your system. And as soon as, like, I read the first word, I was like, no, oh God, I'm gonna start crying again, this is gonna be great. I'm like, hey, I'm a professional voice actress in the studio, I'm going to totally bawl all over your lines, and it's going to sound ridiculous and terrible, and we're going to have to do the take again, and it's going to sound even worse, because now I'm crying. So it actually ended up being one take. Really, it's cathartic in a way for me, I think, because it's really, how do I put it? It's really me talking to, like, specific people. I knew it was gonna happen again. I knew it. It's the stupid writing being so on point. Which is great, definite praise for the character build-up at this point, because I just become so connected with her, and making those parallels all the way along. And then you get to this point where it's like, I know exactly how you feel. Like, I know exactly what you're going through. I mean, it was completely authentic. I mean, I've enjoyed people commenting on the connection they've had to the emotion that's in the character. And this is always the diary I think of, because it's the one that it most got me.
相当感情移入したんですね、このサラさんの声優、サムの声優さんのサラさん。リアルのね、知り合いを投影してたっていうことで、このね、サムのね、声もね、すごいゆっくり、思いを込めて喋っていて人気あるって分かったんだけど、僕はそれ以上に、ケイティさんの方に感情移入してましたね。家族どこ行ったのっていうのと、なんで最後にね、全部分かった時に、扉の張り紙に両親旅行中って書かなかったのっていうのはね、すごい怒りにも燃えましたね。多分 KT もね、それを絶対思ってるよ。で、見通し
I'd already played through the first full half of Gone Home before I started composing any music, which was really important to understand how the game felt and played and looked. But I didn't get a build of the complete game until I'd already been delivered the Part 2 audio logs, and then ended up not playing any of the second half of the game until it was fully complete and I'd written all the music. This wasn't originally my intention, but it meant I ended up fully immersed in Sam's story, essentially to the exclusion of all the other subplots of the game, which are not accompanied by specific music. I don't know if that was objectively the right call or not as the composer, but it definitely made me feel very connected to that character. I probably heard Sarah delivering Sam's story dozens or maybe hundreds of times over. It also meant I didn't actually know the literal implications of the ending of Sam's story, so I was imagining all kinds of potential endings that ended up being a lot darker than what you see when you finally do reach the attic. So as a player, when I did complete the game, I was pretty relieved.
いやでもやっててね、屋根裏で悲劇的なことが起こってるって全く思ってなかったね。もう特にね、地下を歩いてる段階で、もうサムはロニーと駆け落ちたんだっていうふうに ずっと思ってましたね。で、ここから、温室に抜けていくんですよね。この中に入ってないよね、コメンタリーが。うん。これは温室、まあ、そのまんまですね。
We didn't really give Kate very specific direction for this. She gave us some reference for us to approve and everything, but when we put it into the game, again, not a request from us at all. Looking at the struts and the shape of the windows and how it's this sort of deco metal structure with water outside of it, I was just like, welcome to Rapture.
Oh, I know, it's so true.
It almost feels
really
like
is true.
an intentional reference, if only it were intentional.
ラプチャーって別の制作のゲームだっけ？そのイメージに合わせてんのかな？でもこの音質ね、なかなか良かったよ。ここね、ライトがないんだよね。それは電球ないんですよね。本当に日が照っている時しか使わない感じになっていて、実際のイメージに近いんじゃないかな。これ何？マグカップ、これのこと？書くことある？でもね、マグカップってね、結構いろんなデザインのやつが置いてたから、それのことかな。トランプとかね、一種類しかなかったんだけど、マグカップはいろんなデザインあったね。
So you want to talk about this fucking jazz mug?
Nobody wants to talk about the jazz mug.
Well,
It's
except
the
for Carla.
worst. I hate it. It's the worst.
that was such a common theme
Yeah.
when we were like approving assets or making
Yeah.
stuff visually for Gone Home. Is just like, oh my god, that's hideous. I fucking hate it. We're putting it in the game.
Yeah,
Because
there's
like
so
just
much
like
of that.
awful '90s furniture and like the
Like we see it in a secondhand store or like
or you
just
see
on
it
the
in the
internet.
Sears catalog
like,
we
yeah,
bought,
that's
and it's
also
just
true.
like there's
We
so
just
many
feel like,
fucking
oh,
ruffles on it. I want
oh.
to puke. Like the wicker furniture in
Yeah.
Mom and Dad's room. It's
Right.
like that's fucking hideous.
We need it.
そんな家具をわざわざ選んで配置してたの？確かにね、センスの悪いとかの使い勝手悪そうだなって思う家具は結構あったんだよね。もうゲーム設計者はもうそれを狙って作ってたってのはちょっと意外ですね。これなんだっけ？これね。
We
待って、
agreed our
まあいい
last
か。
night together would be our happiest ever.
そう、
And
こ
we'd
れでも
forget
これ
tomorrow was going to
取
come
っとかないとひょっとして秘密の道が解放されないの
We had a good
か
time
な。
seeing Oscar off. Then ran up to the attic to look through our photos. To find one for Lonnie to take with
で
her.
ね、1階のところ
Looking
は
at them,
もうこれでだい
I
ぶ
realized
見たん
they
だけ
were
ど、
all in the past.
あとは今喋っている高齢術のところだよね。渋谷になってる
I
んだけ
didn't know
ど、
what I was going to do. And I cried. And she held me. She said she knew it was hard,
ちゃんと開
but
く？
life would move
おう
on. I said I
開くね。
didn't want my life to keep moving without her. That's when she cried
これね。
too.
最速クリア。
The fact that there are speedruns for our game makes me really happy, and the fact that that the any percent speedrun, aka you don't have to pick up anything, just get to the end as fast as possible, has basically been optimized to I think 47 or 48 seconds. Even just watching that speedrun is really fun because you see the player optimize. Like, for instance, the fastest speedruns, they don't turn on any lights because it would take a fraction of a second to turn towards the light switch and turn it on and then turn back to the direction that they wanted to go. And they just kind of like strafe past things and don't even change direction to move through the house. And then the 100% Diaries speedrun is even more interesting because players use that secret knowledge to play the game totally out of order based on a strategy for, okay, what's the most efficient way to go to these 24 points in the game.
Like spatially, so it's like this visit. It's the salesman, problem or something, where it has to go to all these different points, and what's the best way to do it? It's cool.
Yeah, and so seeing someone think about the house in a totally different way and a strategic way that is about this player created challenge that says, oh, okay, if I go into the basement first, then back out and into the east wing, then don't even go into the west wing until I, and all that kind of stuff. It's really cool to see that stuff evolve, and I'm really glad that we didn't make it so, for instance, you had to read the note about the secret door before you could even click on the secret door, because it would have shut down so many of those opportunities for people to play in interesting ways and express their mastery over the space that they've gained by playing the game.
47秒でクリアできんの？まあ確かにね、ここに屋根裏部屋の鍵があって、あ、これ。ん？あれ？あ、なんかこれ、サムの日記を撮影されるんだっけ？これ止まらないんだよね。多分止まらないと思うんだけど、もう47秒って言ってるのは、まずここに行って、鍵取って、で、屋根裏に向かうっていうことだと思うんだよね。そう、屋根裏に行って、多分、ちょっと待ってよ。多分これで、ちょっと待ってよ。まだ見てない場所があったよね。こっちのね、1階の東側のところの隠し扉から、来客用の部屋に抜けていく階段があるんだよ。あ、そう、これ。
The music for Gone Home was mainly composed over two separate periods, roughly a year apart. A version of Part 1 of the game had to be ready by October 2012 for submission to the 2013 Independent Games Festival, so I did all the Part 1 audio logs primarily that September. The following summer I did another round of logs for the second half of the game, as well as some Part 1 revisions in the ambient exploration tracks. One really nice side effect of the long gap between composition sessions, as well as the structure of writing music that is very literally accompanying a story, was that I ended up hitting on pretty different ideas and approaches over time as I got further along in Sam's story. The original sketches I did had mainly electric piano sounds, which are warmer and more naturalistic than synthesizers and other electronics instruments. As Sam and Lonnie's story developed more, though, I started to bring in acoustic guitar as well. It seemed like an appropriate way for the music to build up some more familiar natural elements, somewhat echoing Sam coming into her own. Eventually, it became a really tonal element of the score. After that emerged, I started to more carefully control the instrumentation for the various main categories of log subject matter, including Sam's self-reflections, Sam and Lonnie, Sam and her parents, and even Sam and Daniel. Some of those have their own melodies and themes as well. That wasn't really a grand plan from the start, and I don't expect everyone to really notice it, but it became one of my favorite things about working on this score.
そんなこと全然気づかなかったんですけど、そもそもさっきも言ってるように、バックミュージックってね、目立たないんです、このゲーム。確かにね、アコースティックギターの方が、こういう恋愛系のムードを盛り上げるっていう方には向いてるかもしれないね。で、ここでね、2階の AT の部屋に来たんで、あと残っているのはもうこうですね。屋根裏部屋。これで最後ですね。開けて。さあ、ここに何かある？どう考えても暗室になった写真についてはちゃんと情報欲しいね。希望。いや、まずはこのベッドについて解説をしてほしいんだけど。
I think this is one where I love the way the music makes it so uplifting. Because it starts out in this very, sad point where it's sort of just like, you kind of don't know what, I don't know, to me it was very emotionally ambiguous in a sense. I mean, she's saying like, oh my god, I can't believe it, like something's happened, something's gone wrong. And as she kind of unravels the story about how she missed the first two calls, which then take you right back to one of the first things you probably do when you get in the house was find the voice recorder. So I love how it loops it around and then it starts building this positive feeling of like how this isn't the end and we are going to see each other again, and there's this wonderful elation that she sort of dawns on in a funny way, and that it's just it's so hopeful, and it's really nice to connect to that and just try and express a little bit of levity after so much weight has built up over the course of her life in this little window.
これはね、わかる。確かにこの日記、スケッチ読んだ時のね、流れてた日記のね、サムのセリフってね、まさにその通りだった。最初はね、もうこれから二人会えなくなるんだねっていう暗い感じだったんだけど、やっぱり会いたいって感じでね、留守番電話の音聞いて、で、会いに行くっていう感じで、なんかすごい希望に満ちた声にどんどん変わっていったね。この日記はね、全部の日記の中でもかなり秀逸だったと思うね。このサラさんの声の中で、音声の中でも。あ、ちょっと待って、危な、これ見逃しとこだったよ。クリスマスダックの置き場所。ちょっと待って、なんでこんなとこにこれあんの？ひょっとして、お家にあったクリスマスダックってひょっとしてこっから持っていったの？
You want to talk about a place for Christmas duck?
This is where Christmas Duck goes.
Oh, it's Christmas duck's little house.
It's his little house. That's where he goes. He goes into it.
There was something that I always assumed would happen. I know that some people did do it because we got tweets, you know, like on the day of release or whatever of people referring to this.
Right.
But kind of based on the gnome in Half-Life 2 Episode 2 or whatever, and just a general, I think, instinct to take the first kind of personified thing that you encounter and
drag it around the house with you.
yeah, you know, like try to take it to the end of the, like take it all the way there with you or whatever. I knew that some people were going to take Christmas Duck all the way from the beginning of the game to the end of the game, and that we needed to pay that off somehow. I used the putback system that in almost all cases is just used to, okay, you pick up a clean Xbox and now you can put it back where you got it. But in reality, I can put one of those putback triggers anywhere in the game that I want. So there's one putback trigger for Christmas Duck where you initially pick him up, and then I put another putback trigger for Christmas Duck here. But yeah, if you bring Christmas Duck up here, you get Katie's interaction prompt that says, "There you go, Christmas Duck," and you put him back in his little nest, and he gets to go back to his home at the end of the game.
Good old Christmas Duck.
マジで？いや、そうもね、ここにね、こんなのがあったのって、ここにストーリーやった時って気づかなかったんですけど、それもうやるしかないんだけど。あれ全然わかんなかった。で、さっきね、コメンタリーの人で、このゲーム発売してすぐにそれをツイートしてる人はいたけど、よく気づいたね。まあ、確かにね、さっきの巣の形、巣のオブジェクトに気づいたら、それわかるかもしれないんだけど、あそこね、屋根裏の階段を上がってすぐ右の方に誘導されるから、もう一度階段を振り返るっていうのって、なかなかしないと思うんだよね。しかも、あそこでゲーム終わりなんで、戻らないんですよね。マジか、そんなのあった？あ、本当だ。さあ、ここがあなたのお家よ。あ、なんか実績解除されてる。多分ね、配信の画面には実績解除されたっていうの映んないと思うんだけど、今僕の画面ではね、なんか実績解除されてる。こっから持ってきたの。それなかなかちょっと面白いね。あ、やっぱりこれ暗室のところにもコメンタリーあるね。
It's one of those things where we had always wanted to, well, we had wanted to pay off Sam's darkroom by letting you go in it and see photos that she had taken, and B, this started from a point of me just being like, oh, we'll end the game the same way we ended Minerva's Den, it'll be fine. But between those two things, we initially figured we were signing up for photos that would have taken a lot of time and effort to make, of like a photo strip of the two of them in a photo booth, which would mean like let's do 4 pairs of, you know, painted photos of these characters, and just like pictures of them in the mirror together, and all of this very high cost, facial rendering basically for Carla to do, because we had, we had this style that was like, okay, you do photo collage and then you paint it over to make it look consistent, and it's a lot of work, and it's hard to get the pieces and the lighting and the poses and everything looking right.
I'm just not that much of a pro in order to be able to do that fast, and so yeah, it would have been months.
Yeah, so we have the one very close-up photo of Lonnie's eye, and then we just brainstormed what are evocative images of the two of them and their life that we could create without having to show their faces a bunch. And I think that, like so many things, taking a step back and only, seeing the implication of these characters is probably a lot more powerful than if we had just made a bunch of pictures of them looking at the camera.
Being less literal is definitely more meaningful in this particular case. To the extent that I remember when I took these holding hands photos with Rachel. I don't know. I took a dozen, something like that, different versions of them, and then I was going through them afterward to try and find the one that I wanted to use to Photoshop in the letters on the heart and everything. And I found myself thinking, oh, these are all so sweet. I'm like, I had just taken them 10 minutes ago with my roommate, and it was just like, somehow this here is more evocative and meaningful than a happy face, I guess. But anyway, yeah. I was fooled by my own shtick, which is extremely silly.
これロニーか。これなんだろうと思ったんだけど、この写真はね、結構インパクトあったね。でね、これ何？これ、一応服だと思うんだけど、これがね、いまいち、これを暗室にわざわざ置いた理由がよくわかんなかったね。じゃあ多分これが最後のコメンタリーですね。最後の場所。
So this is the last room in the game, or at least the last room chronologically in the story.
You made it.
You did it! Yeah, this is where you find Sam's journal that you had been hearing diary entries from. And it's revealed, or I guess implied retroactively, that it has been taking place in a flashback, basically. And Katie read Sam's diary that was addressed to her and is now thinking back to what she saw in the house. So thanks for playing through with commentary mode and listening to us and Yonaman and Kate and Sarah Grayson and Chris Remo and Corin Tucker from Heavens to Betsy and Slater Kinney, who, again, thank you to her for taking her time to record some of her recollections and thoughts for this. But yeah, just thanks for playing, and we hope that you got something good out of all of our jibber jabber.
It's okay if you didn't.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Goodbye. We love you.
Yeah, I guess.
確かに言われてみるとそうなんだ。これゲーム中にこの日記っていうところにいろんな項目追加されていくんだけど、本当はね、この屋根裏部屋にケイティが上がっていって、ここで手に入れて、で、その後に、フラッシュバックと回想し、さっきのゲーム実際の進展って回想なんだ。言われてみるとそうかもしんない。でもこれ気づかなかった。でも確か明らかにそうだ、言われてみると。これちょっと聞けてよかった。このゲームのね、楽しみちょっとまた増えました。で、これでね、コメンタリー多分全部見たと思うんですよね。もしかすると取り逃してるものもあるかもしれないんだけど、一応ね、どうかな、全部見たと思うんだよね。で、このゴーンホームはこれで完全にこのコンテンツ遊び尽くしたと思いますね。 多分ね、いろんな、こういうゲームって実績とかあって、何回したら実績解放されるとかっていうのもいろいろあると思うんだけど、それはまた配信の裏でやっておこうかな。ちょっとこの最後のね、このコメンタリーの話はちょっと面白かったですね。実はこのゲームの内容っていうのは、この主人公の回想録でしたっていうのは、いや、これ言われないと気づかなかった。このコメンタリーちゃんと読んでおいてよかった。いや、今回はこのゴーンホーム、これで終わると思います。見てくれてありがとうございました。